Hi everyone, my name is Alex Casano. I'm the events coordinator here at the Clearwater Historical Society. Today I would like to present to you the Imagine Museum, the history of the Imagine Museum with Jane Buckman. So I hope you enjoy this presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks. Okay, so has anybody been to, have you been to St. Petersburg and the Imagine Museum yet? Okay. So you'll learn a little bit about it today, and you'll see a lot of good pictures. And the best thing about all of this is that because you came today, I do have passes, so that when you get the opportunity and you come down, you'll really see a great thing. So Imagine Museum, and we're located in St. Petersburg, Florida. And I had a video that was going to give you a big rundown on what is Imagine Museum. So Imagine Museum, we are located in St. Petersburg, and let's see how we can get that. So we were founded in 2018, actually, so that you haven't really made it down to a 10, that's really okay. That we opened in 2010, our founder, Trish Duggan, determined that she was in a position that she wanted to give back. So she bought a building. She's a glass artist herself, and so she also then went around the world and acquired the collection of the contemporary studio glass movement around the world. So what you're going to see, if you have an idea of what Chihuly might make, and the type of glass that he has done, that what you're going to see at Imagine Museum are all the various artists around the world who all came together as a force in the early 1960s and really took and moved the whole art of glassmaking up into a fine art realm. So our collection, what makes us special, and also in this presentation you'll see when fonts change on different PowerPoint presentations that different computers pick it up differently. But that we have now over 1,600 pieces in our collection, and representing 20 countries and representing 238 artists. It is one of the largest collections in the United States. It could be the world, but you know, I haven't really checked all of that data around the world, because there are a couple of places that also, a couple countries that show glass. So our mission basically is to really elevate the art and the artists of this particular studio glass movement, of which I will explain. And we accomplish this through research, exhibitions, and education, really trying to educate people about this particular area of fine art that really has been a little bit under the radar, but actually is starting to come up again, is starting to get recognized as a medium. So if you were an artist, and so I'm going to talk a little bit about the American studio glass movement, but if you were an artist and you know, you could paint, you could work sculpture, you could do ceramics, you could do bronze if you had a foundry available. So glass wasn't really a material that fine artists could do in their studios. And the way that glass was developed around the world is that in factories. So you know about the Steuben and Tiffany, and you know all the various factories that would create, but those were all production glass. Even though they would have artisans that were in the factories that were creating all the beautiful pieces, in the end, it wasn't individual artists finding individual expression. And so it really wasn't until this artist, Harvey Littleton, he was, believe it or not, at the University of Wisconsin in Madison. And his father worked at Corning in New York. And so he knew about the glass product. Like his father was the one that invented Pyrex for Corning. So there was a glass relationship. But when he was doing ceramics, and then, you know, he was like, how come we can't make things in glass? And so he actually invented a furnace that could go and heat up to 2,000 degrees in order for, that could fit into an artist's studio, so that they didn't have to work, you didn't have to work within the factory setting, that you could go on and you could actually move forward and create this art form in your studio. So as things beget things and as movements and art history evolved, so there was Harvey. He invented the furnace. He then started a graduate program at the University of Wisconsin in Madison. I'm from the Midwest, so to me I think it's just a hoot that this all started, like in Wisconsin. But who came to study in Harvey's MFA program? Dale Chihuly. And then Dale Chihuly learned more about glass because Dale had seen glass blowing. He was basically a designer. He had seen the glass blowing, but as he traveled around the world inside the factories, but he needed to learn himself really how to work with that heat and how to blow a bubble, and use the pipe and do all of that. So then Dale, after that education, he then went to the Rhode Island School of Design. And then he helped start the glass program, the glass major, at the Rhode Island School of Design, and he taught there for 10 years. So the work that you're seeing here are some of his first students who then went on. Now, you have to realize the artists had no idea really how to use this material. They needed the expertise from the artisans working in the factories to even tell them what. Go ahead.
What year is this?
This is in the early 1960s. Like 1962 is when Harvey invented the furnace. And so by the time that Dale was at RISD, that was in 68, 69, 70, and stayed there until, the mid-late 70s. And believe it or not, so as they were going through all of this, if you can imagine going through the 60s and 70s, and it was artists, these hot shops, and something new and something experimental, that it was pretty wild and crazy times. I mean, and a lot of these artists are still, they're our age now, but that they were, they're still alive, they're still blowing glass, or they're still creating glass. Tutsinski was one of the first female students that took glass, and she developed her own technique. When you're at the museum, to see her vessels are incredible because she pulls glass cane and then she lays it all out and then she puts it into a furnace. She forms the form inside of the furnace. She's got all this gear on, and then and then creates these beautiful vessels. Has been and has had a very successful career. Then we have another artist, one of the first African-American artists that also, where Dale was his instructor, Thurm Statham. And Thurm, started using plate glass and really applying, in the 60s it was abstract expressionism, kind of going into the, after the 40s and 50s. So the movements were changing, and Thurm was very expressive with paint, but he also enjoyed working with glass. Thurm is still working today. Ringling College is going to be bringing him in January, and we'll be hosting him at the end of the month in January also. And still prolific, still creating, and still really pushing the idea of glass as a fine art material. Jenny Ruffner was another one of the early women. So what happened to Dale taught at RISD for 10 years. Then he moved on and moved back up to the Seattle area and opened his own glass school. And by opening up the glass school, he could invite whomever he wanted from around the world. And so it really has been a breeding ground for experimentation and innovation, and just people really testing the limits of glass. And Jenny Ruffner, still artist working today, and she was also one of those early students of Dale. As Dale moved forward in creating all of this, and so all of this work you'll see at the museum, so that we give you a breath beyond Dale of what happened to this glass movement, and it really does expand around the world. It is really quite incredible. So, a lot of times with Dale, there's always this, well, he doesn't do it, he has people do it for him. There's always this thing, or it's craft, it's not art. Well, when you work with glass, it's a very heavy material. You could get a gather of, like 20, 40, 60, 100 pounds of glass on the end of a pipe, depending on what you're doing. You could work with molds and pour glass that you're talking about thousands of pounds. You do need, and you have to have this 2,000 degree heat to keep the glass molten. So you do need to have people around you as you're trying to create this. So it really is a team sport. There's always, it's just like conducting a symphony. You always need the conductor. Otherwise things go awry. So basically, you know, the glass artist, once they become as well known as Dale, and he can afford a staff like that, that's really, you know, how it happens. But you call those people that help gaffers. Martin Blank was a gaffer for Dale, and then went on to have his own career also. We'll be hosting Martin in February, and he will be our 2022 Artist of the Year, where we will have, for a full year, we have galleries devoted to his work. Really fantastic. He was commissioned to do a new piece for the museum. It's something like, you know, 8 feet wide, 16 feet.
How large is this piece?
This piece is about this size.
Wow.
It sits on a pedestal, and what you'll see is something similar to that with this new installation, where he did this tour de force, that each one of those pieces are like double those sizes, and then the two figures are interacting with one another. Really quite spectacular. Really quite, we're very excited. Rich Royal was another gaffer for Dale, who is another artist that enjoys an international career. Robin Greevy was one of the early women. Now, this isn't blown glass, this is cast glass. So you mold it in the positive. You can do it in clay. There's a number of materials now that you can do the positive mold. Then you do the positive form, then you create the mold, and then you heat the glass and you pour the glass into the mold. As you move forward, and as, you know, once we're moving forward from the 60s, the 70s, 80s, 90s, and realizing through the schools, through the universities, these glass programs are in specific universities across the country. So different artists started doing different things. Christina Bothwell, we have such beautiful work of hers in the museum. She's a contemporary, but she combines ceramic and the glass. And it has, you know, her thing is all about family, and the pieces are just wonderful. Or you have another contemporary, Tim Tate, who started working with glass but then incorporated electronics. So this is actually an infinity mirror. So when you stand in front of it, it just looks like it goes on forever. Then, you know, this artist is really in his early 40s now. So this is how contemporary conceptual art impacts the artist who's working in glass. So this is actually a installation piece that's probably, you know, 12 feet long, and all of those individually, you can't see it, so, you know, each one of those pieces, it looks like trash. It looks like, but it's all white, so there's, you know, beer, you know, cans and broken dishes and things all the way through, because it's talking about trash. You know, he's making a statement about the environment. And it's really a striking piece when you see it. It's interesting at the museum when people go past it. You know, there's these little chips of glass that are on the surface, and people are like, oh, there's a piece of glass that's broken, you know. And it's like, no, it's intended. It's really okay, but it's really quite a fun piece to experience. And then, you know, I'm going to move on. There's this artist who is just getting internationally recognized around the world as an artist, not just a glass artist, but an artist, and her name is Karen Lamont. Born in the United States, still in her mid-40s, so that to have this accomplishment and what she does. Now, this is a figurative. She works with clothing and fabric and figures, and so we have two different series of hers, but she did this nighttime, evening, these etude, she would call them, figures. And so they're a darker glass, but she has to model then that figure, you know, in clay, all that detail, create the mold so that she can pour the glass into the mold, let that glass anneal, you know, cool off, So, and that's a whole art in itself too, is determining how quickly you let that glass cool so it won't crack or you don't get bubbles. You know, there's a lot of science and engineering and physics when you go in and start working in glass. But this piece is in the museum too. We've got some spectacular pieces of Karen Lamont. Now, she lives in the Czech Republic because that there are not big enough furnaces that are able to heat the glass that she needs and to anneal the glass once they're complete, because the pieces are huge. And so you need a big oven to put it in, and you know, whether it could take 2 days, 2 weeks, or 2 months, you know, when you pour a lot of glass, you have to know really the relationship and the ratio of the heat and the glass and the type of glass that you're using in order to bring that temperature up to where it's time that you can take it out and start working with it. And I mentioned the Czech Republic because, let's see, there we go, that we have an incredible collection, and I mentioned the Czech Republic because all the while that the Americans were kind of, you know, came out of this goofy place. They were very experimental. They didn't know. I mean, the first stories you hear is like people are cracking beer bottles and throwing them into the, you know, into the fire just to melt and use that. Well, you know, that's not really going to work. And so really how they had to learn, and bit by bit they got to know other people and they shared. But what was happening in the Czech Republic was that it was during the Iron Curtain. So you talk about the 60s and the 70s and moving forward into the 80s. So in the Czech Republic, artists were considered degenerate artists, right? Unless you were making art for the state, you know, you really couldn't make art. You didn't have free expression. So what happened is that the artists went underground. So there were technical schools teaching glass because the Czechs were known for their Bohemian glass. So you would go to a technical school to learn how to work in the factory to create the Bohemian glass. Well, the artists went in there and they became instructors and then head of the departments. And so they actually developed a whole fine art curriculum to really teach the students, you know, about line and color and all of the basics and the fundamentals, but also about that free expression. What is it that you want to communicate through your art? And so Stanislav Lubinsky and Brechtova, they were a couple, and they went on and really started breaking boundaries, just really creating more of a minimalist sculpture, because that was their influences that was going on in Europe at the time, that they could, you know, get information outside of the Czechoslovakia. And they developed this program, they developed new techniques, they were just experimenting all the time, and they were actually educating all of these young students that then went on and continued to create. Now this is another Czech artist at the time, and where Lubinsky and Brechtova were like really challenging, you know, contemporary thought that they thought was going on in Europe at the time, or what they could tell. That then you had Václav Ziegler, who was really fascinated by optical glass, and then the idea of carving and polishing and making optical glass. So his collection is that we have at the museum. It is perfection. When you see it, it is perfection. The photos probably don't do it so justice. And then what was happening in Italy at the time? We all can associate Italy with glass. Well, really, the heyday of Italian glass was really more about the 1200 AD, you know, because of the pane glass and the stained glass and windows, and really that's why it became the center as what it did. But, you know, over all of those hundreds of years, they almost became, you know, their worst enemy, because people expected glass, so the only thing that was really happening in the factories was all these kitschy things that they knew they could sell to all the tourists, and so a lot of figurines, a lot of this, a lot of that, chandeliers, windows, stained glass, but they kept repeating themselves and repeating themselves because they had the history. So it was when Lino Tagliapetra was invited to America to Dale Chihuly's studio Pilchuck, and he had no idea why Dale invited him, but Dale, had been to Italy and he had seen the studios and he had met Lino, and he thought that the glass blowing prowess of this, he was a maestro at 24 or something for glass blowing. So Dale was like, well, these, us crazy Americans, we actually need some finesse in the glass blowing. We really need to know what that art is and what those techniques are. So Lino came over and he saw how free the Americans were in terms of their expression, and he had never seen that before because he was out of the factory setting also. And once he saw it, these artists, they have this opportunity to create whatever they want, to be as loose and as free as they want. In these hot shops, you don't have to use molds, he found a new life. So Lino was really one of the leading Italian artists then that took glass to a new level. And in fact, he just turned 80 this year, and he said that he had been working up into that time, so he's just saying he's putting the furnace aside. He'll still be involved in the studio. He's also very recognized around the world. But he's saying at 80 he doesn't want to work the furnace anymore, but he'll help with the studio. Then so that would be Lino and glass blowing. But then, other Italians started to follow suit, and it really, Murano was not happy. That these Italian artists were going out there and breaking from tradition. They were basically ostracized, but they were artists. They had a vision, they had an idea, they really wanted to communicate it. So Livio was also one of those that, although he wasn't going to stick with the tradition of glass blowing, he was actually going to work cast glass as well as using other materials. So here you see a lot of wood and other materials. But the wonderful thing about this collection that we have of Livio is that in each piece that's there, and I love this piece, there is a glass bubble in the center of his pieces. In each piece, you can see that there's a little blown glass bubble inside of these cast pieces. And I really like to believe that that's an homage to his heritage. That yes, glass blowing did come out of Murano, it did come from Italy, although I don't follow that tradition, because he caught a lot of flack for it. As artists want to give each other flack, and the critics and the galleries and the museums, etc. But so I just feel that it's so special that he kept that little bit of tradition with his work. In that same time, we're moving 70s, 80s, then Bertil Wallin from Sweden was traveling around the world. And he ended up in Los Angeles. He had his degrees. He was trying to find out what's happening in this crazy glass. He ended up in Los Angeles. He worked for another glass studio and somehow found his way up to Pilchuck in north of Seattle. And so he saw this freedom that these crazy artists were doing. And so he went back to Sweden and he changed his whole thing. And now he's also a maestro from Sweden. So we have some beautiful, beautiful pieces of Bertil. He was here, right before COVID. We were hosting him, and just a delightful, delightful creative person in about 84 and still creating work. But then we also have work from Japan and what the Japanese and how they were picking up on the contemporary studio glass idea. And Peter Hora, another person from the Czech Republic, but it's like Peter was a student of Lubinsky, the first couple that I talked about. And so you can see how this lineage just kept moving. A lot of people call it this glass family tree, because who begat, who was influenced by so-and-so. And then we have Peter Bremers from the Netherlands. This photo doesn't do it justice. Peter is really a very strong artist from the Netherlands. He was our Artist of the Year this year for 2021. And the exhibits that we have of his work are just, you know, people walk in and they're just like, wow. You know, and for me, because of the color that he captures, he's traveled around the world, and so he takes forms and he takes different things of what he has experienced, and he puts it into his artwork. So, but again, with this glass stuff, you just got to see it in person. I mean, these might look nice, but it's really, when you see it in person, you're just blown away. Germany also. Wilfried Grutens, what he does with his glass is these are plated glass that are laminated, and then what he does is that he paints each sheet particular and then laminates the sheets of glass to create an illusion where if you look at it one way, you see the fullness of it. If you look at it another way, it all disappears. It's very optical, it's very magical, and he's probably the best person who takes this technique and pushes it forward. But you'll be dazzled by that too. You want to look, and then you go to the side, and really just gorgeous. Or Tobias Small from Denmark. Now, the whole movement was really, you know, it was faculty, student, artist, mentor. It just kept passing down all these particular techniques. You'll see Tobias, we have beautiful installation of his in another show that we have, that's exhibition that we have. It's called It's Not Always Black and White. And so you'll see there's there's just so much more beyond just the surface of what you see, you know, when you're experiencing it in the galleries. So again, you know, we have this collection. When you go to the museum, there's over 400 pieces on display that you'll see. And we do actually, you know, so what you're seeing are just some of the gallery layouts. We do change out the artwork quite a bit. So, you know, we like to keep it fresh for people because our collection is so immense, and there's just so many museum quality pieces. And so really the whole intention of the museum is to inspire, to uplift. You know, the artists are inspired. We hope that the artists inspire the people who view it. And then the uplifting is because there's so much beauty in what we put together that it is people, you know, you get the, you know, after people experience it, all they can just say is like, wow. You know, it's really like they've never experienced anything like it before. And I'll tell you, going through COVID, it was a real beauty uplift for me. I mean, although that, like every museum, you really were, you know, I mean, people stopped coming. You know, we were shut down only for like 5 weeks. We kept open because we really wanted to keep the uplift, you know. And our members, we knew that our members would come because they, you know, now as people are starting to come back, they're like, man, I really loved it during COVID because I could have those galleries all to myself and just really take it in. And then we tried to educate people about this movement. Like I'm telling you today, some of the stories, I mean, the stories run deep and run wide. And you think, oh my God, all of this was happening. And, you know, the nice thing about the glass art is that it's really approachable. You don't have to, you can experience it for its beauty, but then you also, then once that you know the story, it even becomes more interesting. And so we do have tours every day at 3. We either have, and that would be Tuesday through Friday, we have an intro either to the American studio glass or the intro into the international studio glass. So we have then our museum experience. People take you through and kind of give you a little bit deeper dive. Since we are such a new museum, you know, we're working on the audio, you know, the apps and the audio guides and all of that. It just, it really takes a lot to put all that together, and it takes a staff. And since COVID, we really had to cut down on our staff because of attendance, and you know, so we're just trying to build ourselves back up again. For the families and for children, we have two. We have the Journey of the Imagination, and then we have the Mystery Creature Scavenger Hunt. So for the Journey of the Imagination, we have such fabulous pieces from an artist, Rick Allen, who's in Seattle. And he's taken that space idea, maybe from like the 50s or the 60s, with very unique spacecraft that he has made. You know, because he's of that genre. You know, he watched the shows of the 60s and, you know, what was I forget the name stuff, but, you know, he was just influenced by all that. He's fascinated by space, and then that has impacted his art. Bertil Wallin, the one from Sweden, he's made these beautiful 8-foot-long glass boats. And then we put some AR on top of it, and they're like celestial boats, so that you're, you know, kind of floating through space, these boats. And then we have another artist from the Czech Republic that, you know, created all of these, you know, more like they're beautiful alien creatures. And then we have an AR where you have a selfie in its space, and we bring in NASA into, you know, their curriculum, and then you can stand in front of a selfie and you know, a space theme, and then you have your selfie, and then an alien pops up in the AR. It's like so it's very fun. The kids like it, and then we take them into our educational room, and they have you know, trivia about space, and you know, who was the first, and you know, all of those type of things. So very, very fun for families. And here I had a video that also was just some of the artists talking about the museum and the collection, and which was very nice. You got to see the artists talking, but we'll just move on. And then I have this last slide. A lot of times people wonder, you know, well, it's a glass museum. Can I bring kids? You know, can I do that? And yes, you can, because. And we always say that really the children are the best. Actually, you know, for us, it's really where the adults like, don't touch. No, it's museum, don't touch. And so that's really, and so we encourage everybody to come. And like I said, I have some passes, and if you want to find out more about us, we have our website. It's imaginemuseum.com. Very simple, very easy. And if you haven't tried it out, I encourage you to do so.